Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Bush Poppy Farm. I'm Heather, and if you're new here, I garden and flower farm in Zone 9B in Northern California. So welcome to the garden. We are starting our summer pruning of fruit trees today. Summer pruning is not something you have to do, but if you are a backyard orchard grower, it's kind of necessity because you want to really keep the trees to a manageable size. Even dwarf fruit trees, apple, pear, etc., can get up to 15 feet high or more. That's the dwarf variety. So if you want to be able to harvest all your fruit, have it within reach, all that good stuff, and control the shape and the size of your tree, summer pruning is really great. Now, as you just saw, I did these two apple trees here, which I'm not sure I'm going to keep, and that might sound crazy, but this is their 6th year here, and neither of them have ever produced fruit, and both of them have been ravaged by scale insects over the last 2 winters, even though I continued to treat them. The green growth is healthy and beautiful, and they are putting on growth, but they won't flower and they don't produce fruit. So in my garden, in a small space, when things aren't productive, they gotta go. So this is their last chance. I just did a pretty hard prune on them, and we'll talk about the different types of pruning cuts. And right now there's no scale because this is something that happens in like the late winter, early spring. But scale insects tend to live in the soil, and they also tend to be species specific. So if I decide to pull these guys out and put something else here, it will be a completely different plant, not more apples, maybe a fig. So something that the same scale insects aren't interested in because it's a different species. Okay, so I took these guys down. My goal with summer pruning is generally to control the height because during the season, they put on a huge amount of growth upwards. And I want to scale that back down. Also, I'm starting by looking for the 3Ds, dead, diseased, damaged. I'll cut that stuff out first. And then I go in with the 2 different types of cuts. So you have thinning cuts and you have heading cuts. So what's the difference? Okay, I'm going to try to get you guys close enough here to see. So a thinning cut is just where you take a branch further back. You're not cutting it off completely, you're just pulling it back. So like this, on this branch, the new growth, I can see where I cut last year, there's a bud right here. This is all new growth this year, and I'm going to cut it all the way back. This is not producing fruit. What's going to produce fruit next year is these spurs here off of this branch. So I'm going to do my thinning cut right here above this spur. Now, I actually am going to change my mind about that because this branch is pointing towards the inside of the tree, and I want my apple trees to have kind of a vase shape. So you have a couple different options in terms of shaping your trees. A vase shape tree kind of grows like this. So out from the center, all of the branching comes up like a vase, and you have scaffolding branches around the stem that come out, and you want to keep that center pretty open. And the reason for that is air and light. So the tighter the branches are, the more leaves that are in there, the more chance for things like powdery mildew or other types of diseases to get in there. So I've pretty much tried to train my trees to this kind of open vase shape. Now, the other possibility is you have a central leader, which is the main branch that runs up the center, and then you've got the branches that come off of that. So that's another option. My pear tree is kind of more in that vein. Now, the first 2 apple trees that I just pruned that you saw, I originally started out cordoning those. So I trained the branches out to the sides so that they could be flat espalier. And then the garden changed completely and I didn't need that anymore. So I'm slowly over time trying to convert that back to a vase shape, and that can take many years. Unless I want to be super brutal, which I can be, and literally cut the whole tree down to 2 feet and just have a stick. That will completely regenerate the tree. It will then send up a whole new set of branches and you can start all over. But I'm not going to do that with these two. We'll see how they do over the winter. I will do more scale abatement and hopefully next year they will flower and produce, and if they don't, then they're out of here. The other thing to be aware of is you want super, super sharp shears. Now I sharpened these before I came out. Your pruners or your loppers, whatever, it needs to be super sharp, because if you leave jagged ends of the stems, especially when we do our heading cut, that can invite disease into your tree, and you really don't want to do that. And the other important thing is to disinfect your pruners in between each tree, because if there is any disease and you can't see it, you will just be spreading that along. So I like to use a little bit of bleach or a disinfecting wipe, but it just kind of prevents that disease spread. So I'm going to go back here and show you what I'm talking about when I talk about a heading cut. Okay, so a heading cut is when you take a branch back to its origin. And so here, around here is the collar of that branch. I'm going to cut straight across right above that. You don't want to cut down into the collar because that invites a lot of disease, but that's where I'm cutting it. And the reason I did that is because it was heading off into the middle of the tree. So what I'm going to do here is start taking branches back to limit growth here. I'm going to cut right above. This is a spurring, fruiting spur there, and those will be producing fruit next year. So the whole point is to bring the growth of this tree down. This is an apple tree that's doing pretty well, and I want to try to keep this open center. So like this branch needs to come out because it is crossing right through the middle of the center. Come in here and do that. I'm coming all the way back to the stem here and cutting that off. It looks extreme, but that opens up the whole center of this tree, and that's really the goal. So now I'm just going to keep going, cut down the top growth as well as open up the center of the tree. Now I'm going to take this one branch here and cut it off, even though it's an outward facing branch, because it's already kind of pointing down. That means when it gets fruit on it, it's just going to end up laying down because the weight's going to pull it flat. So what I really want is branches that are moving upwards in direction. Okay, so if you see this branch right here, I wanted to take it out because it is pointing towards the center of the tree, but there are apples on this branch. I've got them tied up right here. So once those apples are harvested, then I will go in and cut back this branch so we don't have something going into the center of the tree. Okay, so now we have this pear tree, which is huge. This pruning technique is exactly the same for the pear tree, so I'm just going to take after this. So don't freak out. I know that looked really harsh, and I cut most of the tree away. Now, normally you don't want to do more than about 25 to 30% of the tree, but in this case, remember how I said the first thing I'd be cutting out is the dead, diseased, and damaged? Well, this whole top of the tree has a, I think it's I can't remember if it's pear rust or fire blight, but this tree has been suffering this for a number of years, and this entire stem is covered in this disease. So it had to come out, and that controls the height. And trust me, it will come back. In fact, 2 years ago, I did this plum tree that's next to it, cut it back to a single stick. And last year, you know, it was growing. It didn't give me any fruit last year, but I knew that was going to be the possibility. But this year, it's loaded in fruit. So it will come back. Now I am going to prune just a little bit of this plum tree. Right now, like I said, it is loaded with fruit. So I'm just going to take off the top growth. I'm not going to worry about anything crossing because there's too many fruited branches in there, and I don't want to damage the fruit. So I will come back after I harvest it all and clean up any crossing branches or anything like that. But there's no disease on this guy. It's happy. So I'm going to take care of that, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, now I need to just clean up, get all this stuff into the green bin, and we can move on. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is try again to direct sow some stuff in this bed. Everything has been eaten down to nothing. Even the beans that I planted, they germinated and they got decimated. So what I'm gonna do is cut back all the foliage from the old beans that were here. We're gonna direct sow, then we're gonna put some hoops over it and this netting. Now, will the netting keep the rats out forever? No, but I've made a lot of progress with the rats. In fact, they're no longer, I'm not catching anymore right now, the last like 3 or 4 days, which means I've probably kind of annihilated most of the population. I'm not giving up, but that's probably what it means. But I think there could also be other things in here like bunnies. So I'm going to cover this bed with this netting. And yeah, they can dig under it if they want to, but I'm going to make it really tight. I have found in the past that this works for at least a few weeks. And if I keep up with all of the constant baiting of the snap traps, maybe we'll make some headway. So what are we going to be planting? Okay, we've got a little combo here. It is not too late to start pumpkins. And so I'm starting more pumpkins. This particular one it doesn't have a picture, so I can't show you, but it's abominable. It's from Johnny's. There are 100 days to maturity, so that's plenty of time for us. We'll start some of these. I'm gonna start more honey nut squash. These are my very favorite squash ever. And these are 100 days to maturity. So again, plenty of time for that. And then a Cinderella pumpkin. These are also 100 days to maturity. And finally, some more corn, because all my corn got eaten. And yes, eventually I'll have to take the netting off of this. But once the plants get big enough, then they can more easily survive on their own, and I'll just keep up with the rat patrol, and hopefully we'll get something out of this bed, because basically this bed has been kind of useless this year because everything keeps getting eaten. I do have two zucchinis left in here, and they are producing. I have put them up a stake. I'm growing them vertically, but everything else is gone. So let's see about what we're going to do to prepare this bed. All I need to do is cut back the sticks. I'm going to keep the sweet alyssum. There's some sweet alyssum in here. Then I'll put the metal hoops up. We'll direct sow these guys and then cover the whole thing with this insect netting. Hopefully that will allow them to germinate and get big enough so they can combat the pests. Okay, well, that's the best I can do. Let's hope that that helps. It is tacked down really tightly, so they're gonna have to dig under, which they can do. But like I said, I generally find that they go for easier pickings when they have to actually go under something. Currently, I have beans that I direct sowed in this bed over here, and they are under a cloche, and they're growing great. Nothing has bothered them, I think because they're under the cloche. Now, those holes, while they look small, rats and mice have no problem getting through those. In fact, I think rats can squeeze into any hole the size of a quarter or bigger. So, yeah, and mice can squeeze even smaller because they're smaller creatures. So, the holes don't stop them. It's really more of like, it's a physical barrier. They'll find something else in the garden to eat. Like I said, the traps have been unsprung for the last couple of nights. And I haven't seen any new predation. So, I'll just keep setting traps and to, try to keep the population down. And hopefully everything we just planted will germinate. The soil's nice and wet because the drip irrigation here works great. Hopefully everything will germinate, get nice and big, and it can survive being attacked by rodents. We'll see. All right, guys, that's going to be it for me today. Got some stuff to take care of this afternoon. Tomorrow, I'm doing a skills share on making apple cider vinegar extraction over at an organization's farm. So I won't be filming anything, but next week is going to be a busy week. So on Monday, we'll go out to the farm. We will do the bed flip that I was talking about, get all that done. That'll feel great to get that nice and tidied up. And I have a wedding next weekend. So on Friday, I'm going to have to make a whole bunch of stuff. So you get to see me make bridal bouquets, bridesmaids bouquets, and boutonnieres, boutonnieres are pretty easy, but corsages are harder. I don't know what it is about corsages that are harder for me. Anyway, and then put together a whole bunch of bud vases. In fact, I need to make sure I have enough. I may have to buy more. I think we'll be putting together 90 bud vases. So that's going to be really fun. So join me for that. And then we'll continue to do some more work at the farm. And of course, we'll have more projects here at the home garden. So thanks again for hanging out. I hope you have a wonderful time in your garden, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.